So now I'll show you an example in SPSS of how to do a simple linear regression with two variables. First we go to Analyze, then we find Regression, and we go down to Linear, and we're going to set our dependent and independent variables. Let's look at authentic leadership as the predictor, so independent, and then we'll look at nurses' job satisfaction right here as the dependent variable. All right, so we want the method to be enter, just as we've entered it, but we only have two variables anyway, so the different ways of doing it are not really relevant. But once you have multiple linear regression and you have different predictors, more than just one, then you can make some decisions about this. I always do enter, however, just so you know. So that's all we want to do. We'll press paste to save it. Okay, and then we'll run that. And here you can see we get just variables entered, removed. It's telling us what we're doing. And that's important if you have more than one variable in there as a predictor. The model summary, our R is 0.47, which is high, and our R squared is 0.22. So that means that authentic leadership explains 22% of the variance in nurses' job satisfaction in this sample. Okay, then we go down here for our ANOVA. We find our F value, and recall we talked about how we used to look at charts to find the F scores and see where the cutoff values would be for a specific degree of freedom. So here we have 1 degree of freedom, and we would go to that chart to see if it's significant. It's very high, so it is. And then we go down to our coefficients. So that would be how much of a change in X produces a 1 unit change in Y. And our standardized beta coefficient here is 0.47. Okay, notice that it's the same as the R over here. And it's significant. Okay, so that's a little example for you guys. And I'll do one with more than one predictor now too. So we'll go again to regression, linear. I'm going to add in, so we have authentic leadership. Let's add in psychological capital. Okay, so we have leadership and psychological capital as our predictors. We'll leave job satisfaction the same, and we'll paste that. Okay, so in this model, see up here it now tells us that we have both of these, time to psychological capital and time to authentic leadership entered in. It tells us how we entered it, which is enter. The R square value this is for the whole model now. It went up, so it's now 0.32. Okay, so we're explaining more variance in our outcome of job satisfaction. Our ANOVA here, we've got our sum of squares, our residual, degrees of freedom is now 2. Our F value is 60.54, and our significance is less than 0.05. Okay. And then down here we have our coefficient table. So it gives both authentic leadership and psychological capital. The standardized coefficient here, 0.33 for authentic leadership and 0.34 for psychological capital, and those are both significant. Okay, so they're both significant predictors of the outcome. All right. Now the last thing I want to show you here, if we go back to our database, let's try another regression. we'll do linear. And instead of looking at these two predictors at the same time, we're going to do step by step. So the first step, we'll put authentic leadership, and that's because it's more of a structural thing. Actually, you know what? It might make sense to do it the opposite. So we'll put psychological capital in first because employees have their psychological capital, which is an intrapersonal resource. So they've come to their job with that already. And then we'll put in leadership as a second step. Then we can look at the R-square change. Okay, and I'll show you what that does. So let's paste that. Copy. Okay. So here you can see it's a little bit different at the beginning. Oh, there it is. We have two models now. We've got psychological capital by itself first, and then we've got the model with both of them together. So that's a little bit different, and that's the difference between putting in both of the predictors together and the second version where I did them one step at a time. Okay, so here, I'll go back to show you the difference. So here's the first way where psychological capital and authentic leadership are together. You see model number 1. There is no model 2 there, but in the latest one, we have 2 models. Okay, so that allows us to compare which model is better. Is it model 1 where we just have psychological capital, or is it model 2 where we have both? So we've got our R values for model 1 and model 2, R square, adjusted R square, which is usually what you report, and the R square change. Okay, so here between the two models, the R square improved 0.093 from model 1 to model 2. Okay. There's our ANOVA again, so model 1 first, then model 2 second. And our coefficients here. So for model 1, we just have one coefficient for psychological capital, and then for model 2, we have 2 coefficients, right? So once you add in authentic leadership, you can see that your coefficient for psychological capital drops down a little bit, right? So by itself, the beta coefficient is 0.48, and when you add in authentic leadership, it doesn't explain as much variance. Okay. So I hope that helps you sort of get your feet wet with regression. There's lots you can do. And I'll stop the video there.